Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the EmpowerUp podcast. My name is Byron Beasley. I'm a software engineer. We also have Steve Meehan, who's a professional recruiter for the gaming industry. In the past, Steve and I have noticed a lot of the same pitfalls and mistakes being made by people looking to get into the industry, either newcomers or people looking to transition. And we like to help them avoid those mistakes if possible. And to do so, we bring in guests from around the industry so they can share their perspectives and insights on what it means to be a professional. And with that being said, we have a very special guest with us today. We have Michael Spicer, who is a composer and sound designer. So you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm sort of all over the place as far as what I do on a day-to-day basis, but I guess I would identify myself as a composer and sound designer. I live in Las Vegas. I'm originally from Canada. I don't know how long you want the intro to be.
As long as it takes. As long as it takes.
That's it. That's the synopsis. I also play saxophone.
Yeah, so for a little bit of background, this is actually like take two with Mike. Last year we did a recording with him, and unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, we lost that episode. But he was such a good guest that we had to have him back on. So We're really excited.
Thanks.
He's been up to a lot since then. The last time we talked, he mentioned he was working on a game. So I'd love to catch up with that. And also to promote his podcast as well. He has a few episodes out now. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Since I originally appeared, and actually that was part of me being on this podcast the first time was why I wanted to do that. And you helped me a lot, Byron, with just like the distributing side of that stuff. The podcast is called Spice to Meet You. It's sort of meant to be very general in its topic. It's just me talking to creative people in their industries, because I just want to, I know so many people that I can have really great conversations with about so many different things. And where I am right now in my life, I'm sort of transitioning from being a full-time musician into diversifying some more stuff, trying to get into more game audio, more sound design, stuff like that. And part of that was like, I should, if I'm going to be applying for things like that involve, maybe editing, audio editing, stuff like that, having a podcast would, it's a big part of a portfolio that I really enjoy because I get to just talk to really interesting people and learn from them. So it's called Spice to Meet You. I talk to like musicians. I talked to you two in episode 2. What was episode 3? Or no, you were episode 3. As some musicians before that. Episode 4, it's the last one. I talked to an actor friend of mine that I helped score his short film a couple years ago. And then, I got some more musicians and game dev people down the pipeline, and a combination of the two, actually. Mm-hmm. But, because, the last one I recorded. But, that's sort of that's the synopsis of it. You can search it wherever you find your podcasts, just like this one.
Yep. We'll put a link to it on this one as well.
Yeah.
And something that I really liked, I'm a big fan of your podcast. I'm caught up on all the episodes.
Thank you.
I love how you use it as a chance to get better with editing, but you also incorporate your own compositions and your sound design into it, which to me seems like a really great way of also showing off your skills in those domains as well. Can you talk a little bit about like your editing process? Because I'm sure it takes quite some time to get that down, right?
Yeah, it was at first it was like I wanted to come out with like as polished of a product as I could with episode 1. And there's lots, like, here's the thing about, I guess any creative person is like, as soon as I like release something to the world or like distribute it or publish it or whatever, I'm like, I don't ever want to hear that again.
Yep.
So it's like 4 months down the road, like I'm constantly improving my product. So it's like, as soon as you get a good, like, oh, this is what this should sound like, you go back and look at the first thing you did, and it's like, I want to destroy that. Yep. The good news is I can replace the files if I wanted to, whatever. But I'm not like episodes, but like for instance, I did a little trailer thing where I'm like, I might fix some of that and go back, whatever. But yeah, so the editing for the first one, it was kind of heavy on the editing because I was like, we talked for a long time, my friend Eric and I, because the history there is that we were sort of trying to figure out all this podcast stuff for a couple months before that, and we had recorded our conversations, and I had been sort of learning how to edit dialogue and as I went. Yeah, it's sort of, it ended up being pretty heavily edited. And the other thing that I found, and the point of me bringing up the, like, you know, my product from 4 months ago versus now is like, I had in episode 1, you'll notice I have like all these little like transitions and like, I sort of shoehorn in this like fake ad for myself, and I
that's funny,
and it's like, and you know, yeah, I still think it's funny or whatever, but it's like it interrupted it for no reason, you know. There's no like sponsorship or anything on the podcast, so I'm just kind of like, and it's fine to have like edit points and stuff for like if you eventually do have a sponsorship, that kind of thing. But I ended up just going, I'm gonna just go beginning to end. If I can help it with no transitions, no ad things, like I don't, you know. The other thing was like I had in my head, like, because I had recorded all these little short ad segments because I sort of started doing podcast stuff with my friend's podcast. So like there's a podcast called Dad Joke Loading with my friend Christian McFarland. And then the Extra Buttery podcast was something else. I did some sound, I did some music for it. And in turn with that, I was just like, hey, maybe I'll do this for free, but hey, maybe play this ad that I made for myself. And it was like, but then, and that's sort of where the idea, what replaced that was me doing like the sound design at the beginning and end of each episode. So it's like, I end one episode with a helicopter coming to pick me up.
Yes, I like that. That was so creative.
And then the next episode is the helicopter dropping me off, and then I go. So I have this dumb little, you know, sound design transition thing. And that sort of filled that role of what I was trying to prove with those little ads, which was like, hey, look at my sound design stuff.
Yeah,
so,
I love that.
So it's sort of, it's evolved into like, now I'm just like, I have a formula, more or less, now.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because I think you had the advantage of watching our podcast first and our mistakes. Sorry again for your episode.
No, I mean, it obviously benefited me in the end, so thank you for making that mistake.
Yeah, I know. It's just, it can be so hard to get, you know, feedback on this kind of thing, right? Because someone can tell us something that's super valuable, but we might have been 5 episodes in because we have like a backlog, so it might take some time to actually see those improvements.
Yeah, no, and that's the same. It's just to carve out the time for, because you guys aren't getting paid for this, so it's like none of us are getting paid for it, so we just kind of do it in our spare time to,
right? You
know, just like we do with any other self-improvement project. You know, there's a guy, I will say, side note, and you can edit this out if you want, but there's a guy that one of my students actually at UNLV. He's really good at like the production side of stuff, like better than I am. And he helped me with, I paid him to make a template for like, just to boost kind of like some dialogue. He knows a lot about like dialogue and editing voice and all that stuff and I use that template now, and I'll give you his info if you want.
That's
he
cool.
Can set you up with just a little, you know, because like I was panning, for example, I was panning the voices in my first episode, and he's like, that's not really an industry standard. I was like, okay, didn't know that. So anyway, this is an example, but anyway, you can edit that out if you want.
Dude, that's freaking awesome. And then one of the things that I love about having a podcast is being able to have in mind a backlog of guests that you want to have. And I know that when you actually have a podcast and you tell people about it, it's just like, oh, wow, you know, can I hear more? Can I be on your podcast? Like, what are some of the things that you found out about reaching out to other people and asking them to do a podcast with you?
Well, I mean, I haven't. You guys are you guys are the closest to strangers that I've had on my podcast. I don't consider you guys strangers, of course, but everybody else has sort of been like a pretty, like I've known them pretty I'm gonna take a while to get through the people that I know to get to the strangers of whatever, but like I think that it'll sort of speak for itself. Like it's like if because I wouldn't mind that you say that, like in the future I wouldn't mind maybe like reaching out to some people that I don't know and go like, hey, or maybe I met you at like Game SoundCon or something, and I'm like, I think it'd be awesome to have like example. ZW Buckley is the first person that comes into mind. He's an game audio. He's a composer, really nice guy. Met him at the thing in like Alt Space VR, and he had like cool. His avatar looked just like him. So I was like, I walked over to him like, hey, you're, you know. But for instance, it's like he was super approachable, and I was like, I bet he would do it if I just sent him a link or whatever. But yeah, I think just as far as reaching out to people, I think I want to make the product as good as I can, and I want it to. So like, if I interview like you guys, and then I go like, oh, I want to interview this other game audio person or programmer or whatever, I can point to your episode and be like, here's some of these guys. Like, for example, here's what we talked about. And here was the 5, and you know, gives them an idea of what to expect. So,
dude, that's freaking awesome. And like putting this podcast together, I know that you've been doing it for about half a year now, if I'm not mistaken. Like for actually, anybody else,
wow.
for anybody else out there that's looking to like put a podcast together, like what are some of the things that you would personally recommend, like just getting started?
Don't underestimate how long it takes to name your podcast. Because I swear to God, it was like Spice to Meet You sounds like it's dumb, right? It's this pun sort of like blah blah. But like I landed on that after like months of thinking about it. I have I have a podcast Google Doc with everything, like all my guests, all the stuff in it, and it's like a full page of lists of names. I should pull it up at some point, but because the thing is, it's like it's all tied into what is the thesis of your podcast, and it's like for me, I was riding this line between being general enough to where I can kind of do whatever I want. So it's like it's not just going to be me interviewing Vegas musicians or just interviewing musicians in general. It's going to be like creative, blah, blah, blah. But then it's like you want it to still be focused enough to where, you know. And then what I realized from that was like I'm sort of the product of the podcast. So it's like it's more reflective. It's not. It was going to be like creatively speaking or something creative. Again, I could show you the list, but I realized sort of going as I went through it, like, what is the podcast? What it's like me talking to people. So the product is basically me, sort of my, I guess, personality, if you want to call it that. So I was trying to reflect more of like, it's this guy talking to people. So Spice to Meet You. It's like, you know, which funny is that there's some kind of like, moisturizer or something called Spice to Me, because I googled it after I named the podcast. I was like, oh god, I hope there's not like trademark issues. And yeah, it's there's free advertising for you, some kind of like if you Google Spice to Meet You, it's like some kind of moisturizer or body butter or something that comes up. So I'll just take that on the chin and just advertise for them so I don't get sued. I'm not making any money. Disclaimer, not making any money from this, just so you know.
Got it. Okay, so took some time to actually create the name of your podcast. And then I know one of the things that we talked about already is that this is a bit of a take two on the original conversation that we had. So I know one of the things that we love to promote on this is the power of networking. And I know that's how you and I met. And way back in, maybe a year ago.
Wow.
What?
Good God.
Do you remember when we first met and how we met you and how we came across like just being buddies?
Well, yeah. So it was the Seattle, the networking IGDA Seattle thing. I don't remember the name of it. Sorry. And it was just purely like, hey, we're all interested in the game industry, and it's sort of the crowd you would meet at a game jam. and it was like we spent 15 minutes in like a Zoom break-off room with just some strangers, and then we just sort of introduce each other, talk for a little bit, and then 15 minutes is up, next room, and you just keep doing that. And it was good because it's like this efficient way to do it. And like, I think that obviously that's a little, you'll get a shallower version of networking, but you'll have a bigger spread that way versus like, this where we're like talking in depth with each other and learning about each other, whatever. But it was good. It was a really efficient way of networking, and it was funny because Steve kept just randomly. It was all random, so we kept ending up in the same room together. So it was meant to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those things that I love about networking in particular is for speed networking events like that, you get to meet a lot of people and you can kind of feel their vibe to begin with, right? And that's one of the cool things is that you just find people and you hang out with them just for a little bit. And from those, it's kind of like, I don't want to say micro dating, but it's just like a really quick.
Oh no, it's totally speed dating. It's exactly speed dating. Yeah, just on a professional. Yeah.
And then like from there, then you can connect with people and you never know when you're going to come across somebody who's really going to make an impact on you. Yeah. And that's just one of the cool things is that I love how you and I just met. Like we never intended it. We were just in the same place at the same time. And then because of that connection that we had, we were like, oh shit, now look how that one moment spawned things like us having these podcasts together and just really being able to help each other out. So I just wanted to take that as a point for the listeners out there is just like go out and meet people. And even though it could be such a short kind of conversation, you have those people in mind and you can reach out to them again and at least build on that original conversation.
Absolutely.
And you never know how that's going to turn out in the end. And I mean, case in point right here, Michael Spicer, Spice to Meet You with his own podcast and invited us to be a guest. And who knew that would come out of this one original conversation that we had at an IGDA speed mixer type of thing.
Yeah. And to follow up on that, I have a question for both of you two, right? So neither one of you guys are from Seattle, but that one meeting led to a year later, you guys are friends. We're all doing this podcast. This is the third time we've recorded together. Steve and Michael, how did you guys find that mixer, right? Like what made you decide to look up Seattle IGDA meetup?
For me, I think it was a West Coast IGDA thing. So me being from San Diego, California, I think the whole West Coast decided to get together to do a speed meetup during the whole pandemic thing, and we just had tons of people on there and just thrown into random rooms. And I've been a part of the IGDA for 5-6 years already. So it was just one of those monthly mixers that I go to, and they had this one event, and that's how I got roped into it.
Awesome.
Yeah, same thing. It's like, and I think it's interesting that because I had known about IGDA here in town, and then I learned about the different chapters, and it's like I get like notifications from, I think it's like Eventbrite or something. But yeah, it's interesting you say the pandemic because it's this weird paradoxical thing where we're all alone, but now because of that we're reaching out in these other ways to connect to people, and here you go. Like I don't know how tall either of you are. For example. I don't know how tall anyone is ever anymore because I just see a little box. Anyway,
For the record, I'm 5'6" on paper. 5'6" on paper.
There you go.
Yeah,
like you're standing on paper. Like how is it a stack of paper? How tall is the stack of paper though?
About 2 feet.
Yeah. So that's one of those things is like I'd been a part of the IGDA for like 5+ years. And how long had you been a part of that, Mike?
I mean, almost as long. Like since, well, no, not true. Probably 2-3 years. But like not. And here's the thing: not like an active. Like I'm not like going to every event or anything. But I had just sort of known about it, and I'd gone to a couple to sort of figure out what I found out what a game jam is just on my own. And I thought that was a good thing to explore, which obviously it has been. So
Yeah, that's freaking awesome. The game jams and the things that you experienced, like being a part of the IGA. And then speaking of different projects, I know that there's some things that you've been working on that you've been like posting on LinkedIn and kind of showing updates. And can you talk about what are some of those projects and those things that you put together?
Oh man, what was the last one you saw? What's that? I'm trying to think of what I actually post. I haven't posted in a while. Like the sound design stuff. I mean, there was, obviously. Sorry,
there was definitely some 8-bit recording type of musical
the album
things.
Yeah,
right. So I had it was. It's funny because I think I talked about that in episode 1 of my podcast with my friend Eric. I made a YouTube series actually on your. I talked about how it was your suggestion, Steve, of like posting me working on some stuff, and I think that, and how people will find that interesting. And I'm like, me watching it, knowing me and my own, it's like I find it unwatchable because it's just me working.
Yeah,
right.
It's
it's not a tutorial, but it's just me. It's called Spicer Makes 8-Bit Music. It's on my YouTube. But it's just it was just something to try, and I got a lot out of it because I'm going to, once I actually come back around to finish that project, which I have more progress done on that. I'm going to make a final video and sort of explain like where to find it. It's basically an asset pack that I'm going to sell on Unity, the Unity store, and hopefully the Unreal. I don't know how it works if there's exclusivity with that, but it's basically going to be like 8 to 10 tracks of music. Probably more than that, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I'm probably going to have like... I could go into that, but it's going to be 8 to 10 tracks of loopable music with like different layers and stuff that you can use in a video game. And then also around 100 to 150 like just little sound effects. And it's sort of a variety. So I have for example, I have like a pirate track that's just sort of like a cartoony kind of piratey sounding thing. And because I have that track, I'm going to have a certain number of sound effects that have to do with that, like a little seagull noise or a little like seagull 1 and 2 noise, and then like, waves or something. I'm basically trying to figure out like which ones I should have to do that. And it's not meant to be like, oh, this is all you need if you're making a game. This is the one-stop shop. It's not. It's just like it's something to add to your, library of assets.
That's awesome.
Who's like doing game jams or whatever kind of thing.
And so I'm a part of quite a few forums on game audio, sound design, game development, and a pretty common question that a lot of people getting into the industry ask is, how do I approach this? I've done music for film, I've done music for TV. So what are some insights that you've gained because you specifically mentioned loopable music, stuff like that. What are some insights that you've gained in working on these styles of music?
I think that a good place to start as a resource is the Winifred Phillips book. Philip?
Winifred Phillips, I know exactly.
But it's Composer's Guide to Game Music. Yes, okay. I'm not going to go get the book. I remembered. Composer's Guide to Game Music. It was the first one that popped up when I was like, what is, like, how does audio in games kind of differ from just linear music and the stuff, the concept. That's a really good entry point into like learning about the concepts that you need to know in order to get into this stuff. And from there, I learned about, there's different ways that in a video game you are doing things that, like, the system doesn't know what you're going to do. The whole point of a video game is that you're making choices and like the game is reacting to your choices, and it's a feedback loop between you and this sort of game system. And with that is like, if you're walking around in Skyrim and everybody, like anyone who's played Skyrim, if you start hearing those like timpani comes in, it's like, okay, there's something hunting me. Music can play such an intricate part of the game experience and how non-linear music works. I guess if the question is, what are some things to look at? I think learn what middleware is. Here's the thing. I don't have my name on like a big title or anything, right? I'm still in the process of getting into this industry. But one thing that I've found is know how to loop music is a good, because what you want to do is get into game jams, because you don't have to know anything about programming, you don't have to know anything about graphic design or game development at all for me being a musician going into learning about how to produce loopable tracks. You want to be able to make them loop seamlessly, because what's going on is you're going to hand over a track of music to the person who's going to put it into the game, probably look up the code to integrate it into the game. And you want, because a game it could last a minute or an hour, right? So you want to, if you're making music that's going to do either of those things, it's going to loop back on itself, unless you're going to write 60 minutes of music for a game jam, which you're not. It's going to have to loop back on itself. So little techniques, like just, that's something to research, because there's little things that happen, like if there's like reverb and stuff, blah, blah, blah. Reverb tails and stuff have to be like inserted at the beginning of the track. Anyway, that's something to research, is like making just simple loopable track at first, and then that'll kind of get you into where you can do game jams and do networking, and it's a launch point, I guess, for that kind of stuff.
Cool.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. That was a great answer. And you've mentioned game jams a couple times. What's been your experience working on game jams I'm going to assume that you're probably one of the sole audio or music people at the game jams?
Yeah. Well, not at the, like on a team?
On a team, sorry.
Okay,
on a team.
Yeah.
And because I know that for me getting started, I heard about Fmod, and I'm just like, oh, I can use Fmod. But then it was like, wait, how do I use this in a game jam? Yeah. So what's been...
Yeah.
What's your experience?
Well, that's the thing, is like before I ever did a game jam, I did this little like Udemy course on Fmod, and like... And Fmod's free to download, and you can learn it just on your own, just from whatever. And it was this little course. It was a really good course. And I was all like, oh, okay, let's go. Let's do this. It's like, it's not as hard as I thought it was. And then I go to a game jam, and like, they're like, oh, Fmod, that's fancy. We don't use that. So the point is, like, if you're going to be doing a game jam, you're probably not going to be working with like using an Fmod music system.
Yeah.
I did one game jam where I did use Fmod, and that was mostly because it was just kind of a flex, right? It was kind of like hey, if this is going to be on my portfolio, I want to have like a little, I want to have made a little Fmod music system where if like I go from here to here, if this parameter changes to this, then I have this track that kicks in, like pause menu music or whatever. Mm-hmm. And because I knew how to do that, but I knew nothing about programming. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, it's, if you're looking to, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're looking to learn Fmod or Wise, like they both have like really good learning resources where you eventually want to have like a sound reel, for instance, mm-hmm. that if, they say to sort of, I've heard like, focus on either AAA or indie, but it's kind of like, I feel like that's kind of up in the air right now. I don't have a job on either, but I think that you want to just have as much in your portfolio as you possibly can, and applying for jobs, and sorry, I'm all over the place, but applying for stuff that you are going to be a sound designer on. If we're talking about jobs, like the end goal, like mm-hmm. you were talking about game jams and having fun learning and stuff, but you have the end goal in mind. The primary thing that you want to worry about is if you're going to be a sound designer, if we're talking about sound design versus like music, you just want your product to sound good. Actually, that applies to both, obviously.
Yeah.
You want to have like, this sounds good. This has a good mix. Like the low end, like the EQ is good. Like you want the quality to speak louder than anything else, louder than, how intricate your FMOD music system is. Like it's like those are employers, from what I understand. It's like they look more for your skill as someone who can produce good sounds, rather than that's just a program you can learn. You'll get there with that, right? But yeah, so I would say if you're looking at just getting started with game jams, which I think is essential, because like it's just kind of learning the jargon and getting used to what a curly bracket does in programming. like just knowing basic stuff is going to help you communicate with a team and know what to deliver to them as an asset, as a sword noise, or as a loopable piece of music or whatever.
Right. And
that was a long tangential
it was, again,
answer,
incredibly helpful. I did want to take a second to kind of explain to our audience. I know Michael and I, we understand this language pretty intimately, but we've thrown around words like middleware, FMOD, WISE, and just to make sure that the general audience knows what that is. So that's an audio middleware, which is basically something that allows a musician or a sound designer to work on some of the core logic systems of interactive audio on their own. And that leaves a lot of...
on their own, meaning like without the use of programming skills,
Exactly. Versus you could code all of this in yourself, but that takes programming power away from other important systems in the game. So yeah, that's a pretty important tool to learn. It's kind of like the tools of the trade if you want to work in game audio when you work on a large enough project. But as Michael pointed out, on like a game jam or a smaller game, you typically don't use middleware. So yeah, you do a lot of programming in that case.
Yeah, man.
And speaking of games, like obviously there's a reason why you're into video games and doing music. Are there any impactful like games that you've played that have been like, this is why I want to do music in gaming? Like, what are some of those headline titles for you?
I'm pointing at my Majora's Mask on my wall. Yeah, man. I mean, this can go into a lot of stuff. I mean, it's just like we consume we're all affected by any media we consume, especially when we're younger. And when I'm younger, I had, N64 was sort of my defining console. I don't know, whatever you want to define it as, but I played I'm Koji Kondo, man. I played a lot of Nintendo games. Zelda especially has just sort of like the melodies that you would hear, not so much that they differ from like movies and TV, but like what I discovered later on. And it's not to say that like this is why I like them. I think I just like them because I enjoyed those games and they got stuck in my head maybe. But at the end of the day, there's this nostalgia that happens with that. When I went in to sort of learn how to do 8-bit music and all that stuff, I ended up researching the sort of grandfathers of video game music, which is like David Wise and Koji Kondo and Nobuo Uematsu. So like the Final Fantasy people, Koji does everything Nintendo, and then like David Wise these guys invented a different way. They were programmers and composers, and that the marriage of those two affected the music and because you had we had a limited number of sounds that you could make. So like the NES had only a certain capacity, so you have like you could have this waveform that sounds like shh, and you have this one that sounds like a sawtooth, sort of a this one sounds more mellow than that. So you had just very limited material. So what ended up happening was they had to write in a way that was simplified, but still gave you the impression of like this is a symphony playing, right? It's like so. I found that. So it's not to say that that's what influenced why I got into like this kind of music, but it's sort of like a retrospective thing where I found out later on, like, that's really cool I think that's why I like that so much, is because it's, you know, you have like there's so many, like it's a little steel drum kind of thing, and it's like there's so many influences of the actual material, and like your brain fills in like the rhythm section that's like playing along with that, but it's really just this noise thing going whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's just so like they had to be melodic, they had to use really good counterpoint, and yeah, it's just that kind of thing. It just warms my heart. So Koji Kondo, Nobuo Uematsu, you know, any of those, they're definitely influences as far as when I'm going to write specifically video game music. Mm-hmm. So.
Right on. That is freaking awesome, and I love like the little history lesson that's in there, because video games have been a part of our lives for, you know, so many years, and that's what kind of what helps influence us to want to pursue it as a career. And then speaking of careers, one of the things that I love is that there's so many ways of taking like your passions and turning it into something that you can do as a profession. And I've seen that, you know, video games and music, there's so many ways of kind of doing that professionally, whether it's making the actual music in the video games or doing things like having your own YouTube channel. Like there's this guy, Smooth McGroove. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he does like a cappella versions of video game music, and that's his thing. And that's like, I know that video games and music are your passions. Have you thought of any other career paths other than just, you know, making music in gaming?
I think of it more of where have I invested my time and my money, you know, as we sort of have to, you know, you're constantly reassessing where the trajectory of your career is based on what you've done. How, like, I have 2 jazz degrees hanging on my wall. I can't tell you the last time I had a jazz gig. Well, actually Christmas, if that sort of counts. But, but like, I don't, like the things that I learned, all the time that represents 6 years of my life and many thousands of dollars, right? But, and I'm trying, and in thinking of where I'm trying to expand and go into, I'm trying to think of like, I know all this stuff about, like, for instance, how many careers could you list that require a knowledge of EQing a piece of audio? Or like knowing what a plosive is. Like there's lots. There's podcasting, there's radio, there's, you know, studio work, there's like studio recording, engineer stuff. There's all this stuff that this like skill X could be applied to, right? So that's sort of where my head is when I'm thinking about where I can go and what I can do with this stuff, because and that's a big part of the podcast is like, not only it's so many different things wrapped into one thing, but it's an excuse for me to sort of advertise myself, sometimes literally, like in episode 1, but like advertise my own like editing skills and like and knowing that I can produce this. Here you go. That's what I can produce, and then go and apply to job XYZ from there. You know, I don't know if that answered your question, but I mean, podcasting. So I'm remembering your question. Podcasting is sort of a thing. You know, sound design, any kind of like. Right now, I'm looking into like integration, like actually learning a little bit more about programming to where I can, you know, put a loopable track of music into Unity, for instance. But like. Literally, I have, and I'll just mention this, I have the next 6 months of my life sort of planned out. I keep telling myself I'm going to finish this big band chart today, but I don't know. We'll see. Finish the big band chart. I have this mixing course on Udemy that I'm just kind of brushing up on mixing stuff and like learning a little bit more in-depth stuff in Logic. And then I'm gonna do some sound redesigns to get an updated reel for sound design. And then after that, I'm gonna do the Wise course that they offer, the free Wise course, because I know FMOD but I'm on a lot of job applications. I'm seeing a lot more Wise lately, so I'm gonna dive into that. And then by the end of this semester of school, I should have what I right now view as a comfortable like jumping off point as far as a portfolio to go, because like I feel like right now stuff that I have is kind of outdated, and so I'm basically I think a good thing if this is an advice kind of podcast kind of vibe, and this is, I tell my students this can be applied to literally anything. Time management is so important. And like just getting an idea, even just listing something. Go, okay, I have 5 months. What do I think I can do in those 5 months? Can I finish a Wise course? How long does that take? Look that up. Research everything, and figure out how to get from A to B. Because like it sounds so dumb and simple, but like a lot of people just don't examine their situation enough to know where to go next. Oh, I'm just gonna keep plugging away keep writing music until I get a job. That's not gonna work, man. Look at what does the job application say? Does it say you need to know this program? Maybe go and learn some of that program. No, maybe don't drop $600 on Pro Tools if you don't have to, but right? So that's all. Just like time management, man. It's like just make it happen, I guess.
Yeah, and I love that you kind of pointed that out. Like some of the soft skills that you should have to find a job, but things that aren't necessarily taught in like the academic environment. Like you have such an incredible insight because you actually teach, and you can see like the difference between what's taught academically versus what it takes to be like to work in a professional environment. Can you kind of give some insight into what are some of the things where things that students need to know, but they're not necessarily getting from the books that they're reading in school?
Oh man, that's a whole book. That's a whole seminar. I mean, number one was what I just said, like time management. Just like if you, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on that. Pull your head out of your ass a little bit. It's like, it's a lot of times it's obvious, like what you need to do, but that people aren't listening to this to be told like, pull your head out of your ass. I guess, sorry if you have to add bleep noises there, Byron. But it's like, okay, let me ask you to clarify the question. Like, from a standpoint of who am I talking to right now? Like, is it a programmer? Is it like game audio people? Is it a musician entering this field? Or
I would say for a student who's looking to get a job, and the reason why I say that, like a student that's about to graduate and going to jump into the professional world, the reason why I say that is because I know for me, getting out of school, like I was overconfident because I thought, I've got good grades.
Everyone is.
Now that's gonna translate into getting a job immediately, and then life had a certain way of kicking me in the ass and saying, yeah, you're not as hot as you thought you were. And there are tons of lessons that I wish I would have gotten before, or maybe I did, and I was just too stubborn to listen to it. But that's that comes with just having the experience and being there. And so what are some of the things that, even though it's things that students have heard already or may have heard already, what are some of those lessons that you would like to impart on them?
Well, I mean, what you just said, like, I think I'll never know as much as I thought I knew when I was 20, right? Like, I was so sure of everything when I was 20. And no 20-year-old wants to hear that. And then like they'll turn 25 and think they know. No. And I'll turn 40 and I'll listen to me saying this and I'll go, oh, that guy. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a never ending thing. You'll never, like, I remember seeing some kind of pie chart of like things you'll learn in your life. And it's this tiny little, and here's all the knowledge you could ever learn. And here's what you have the capacity to learn in one lifetime, one human lifetime. Right? It's just, there's always more to learn, I think, is a good attitude to approach things. As a musician, the people that I respect the most and that I learned the most from have been the most modest and the most, like, I guess, like, people who know that they're not an expert totally, right? They have, all you can say is here's the experience that I have, and based on that, here's my perspective on this topic or whatever. Which is exactly what I'm doing right now, right? I'm not a AAA sound designer yet, but it's leaving school. I think one thing that I think that you need to sort of, we think of education as this like ticket of like you were saying, like I should just have a job right away, but that's just sort of you exit that building. And now you're sort of allowed to be in this sphere of people because of this base knowledge of whatever. And you don't necessarily need a 4-year degree for that. You can, of course, get this or whatever. But I don't think formal education is bad by any means, because it's sort of it's a goal. It's a signpost saying I was able to do this. Like, I have a 3.9 GPA from my master's, and I can say that, you know. Because and I'm not going to say, like, there's this particular graduate course that I took that was like one of the hardest things I've ever done, and I got 99% in it. I don't remember a damn thing from it.
Oh, wow.
But I did it, and I actually, that's not true. We learned all about Wagner. But anyway, what's my point? My point is, one thing leaving school is don't assume anything, and don't be afraid going into networking situations to just talk to people, because there's lots of things that there's so many different perspectives on things, and things like Game Sound Con, like I could just list a bunch of like conferences and networking stuff. There's really has never been a better time to network, because this whole, and I imagine the pandemic has helped again with like, yeah, neither of us are from Seattle, but we met on this Seattle networking thing. There's so many. One, you'll meet people that are the exact same as you, just left school. You'll make a connection with those people because neither of you know what to do next, but you'll trade ideas. Hey, I didn't think of that, or maybe I will learn FMUD and WISE and not, or whatever. But you'll also meet people that you'll just stand and talk to people that are doing the stuff that you want to be doing, and they have been for like a decade. You know, I was having a conversation at Game SoundCon in VR, like, again, not in real life, but like there was a spatial element to it. And then I found out like half an hour into the conversation that he did all the music for Outer Wilds. I can't think of his name right now, but I was like, and I'm like, it's not like to say that I wouldn't have approached him, but I think I would have probably talked to him a little differently because of where I am in my career. I would have approached him differently. And I'm like thinking, like, he said that, I was like, oh, really? And then I was embarrassed that I was like, oh, you know, kind of like fanboy. But at the same time, I was like thinking, like, oh, hope I didn't say anything disrespectful or anything, right? Because but in that whole process, it's like you realize people are just this people, right? They're just, you know, and they deserve the respect of, you know, like, you're not going to walk in and I'm not going to give him like tips or anything on writing music, because like he has his resume as he does, but it's the type of thing where you shouldn't ever be afraid to talk to anybody who might seem like this monolith of a person, but really they're just like, you know. And there's a ton of that in the music industry too, where it's like my saxophone teacher, and in my graduate degree played with Ray Charles, toured with this, that, blah, blah, blah. And like, he's one of my really good friends, you know, and he's 10 years my senior, but we're it's scary how similar we are sometimes. I think I'll have him on the podcast at some point, but don't be afraid to talk to people. I could have said it that quickly, but I went off on 18 tangents.
Yeah, that was great. I'd love to add on to that too. I know you and I have music degrees, and I don't know if it was your experience, but mine in school was people tended to be maybe a tad bit narrow-minded in their focus.
Oh yeah.
I would just say be open to different income streams when you're first graduating. There's no shame in working a different job when you're first graduating. It's a different story between having a music degree graduating and having a computer science degree graduating. And I think you need to come to terms with that, because you should understand that even before you graduate. I think that's a really big thing to understand. Like, you're still successful. You teach. You've worked in other projects. And I think it's important to redefine what success means to you, at least when you're first graduating as well.
Overcome your pride. And I've come to terms with the fact that, like, leaving, especially music degree, you think, because I went from a music degree to, like, I was like, I know how to play saxophone, and then it's like, I'm painting houses for the summer, and then, you know, and then in the fall I audition for a cruise ship, and then I go and work on a cruise ship for 6 years. So then my self-esteem is a little bit more restored. But then after leaving there, it's like, am I allowed to call myself a professional musician if I have like a couple gigs a year, but I teach, right? Like, so am I? Absolutely. But then it's like, are you? It just depends. Like, what I realize is that you don't have to be playing for you don't have to be the trombonist for Cirque du Soleil Zumanity in order to call yourself a musician. If you are a musician, you're a musician, right? It's like, your income stream doesn't have to solely come from blowing into a tube, right? The other thing too is, like, you can't ever underestimate. You have to have respect for other people's spheres, right? Yes. So, like, programmers, like, I'm never going to be a programmer, and I could if I wanted to, if I went to school for it, if I really buckled down and I just did it. But I don't have it in me to do a third degree, right? But what I like to take into account is, because especially when you're working with programmers, you're working with artists, you're working with, like, these are skilled professions that take time to hone your craft. Like, especially with music, there's a tendency to think of music as just like, well, if you can sing, you can be a musician. It's like, there's so much study that goes into being a musician, learning how to create contrapuntal lines, learning how to, and I can list a whole bunch of technical things, blah, blah, blah. But it's likewise with programming, likewise with, I know that, and I know that in game dev, there's a lot of these people that are doing, I want to be the jack of all trades. I want to do everything. And I think there's a place for that. I think a generalist it's a good idea to have a general idea of things. But then, you know, I don't know if the whole master of none thing, there's lots of people who can do all of it, but I think that there's an underestimation of when, like, maybe a programmer or an artist goes, oh, I'll just make a track of music and that'll be this quality. It's like, well, you'll hear, if you can't hear the difference between your product and, like, someone who does it full time and like has, like, years and years of experience, if you can't tell the difference between your little Logic thing that you made and Hans Zimmer, then maybe it's not that there's no difference, maybe it's that your ears aren't developed enough, right? So all I'm saying is just, like, not to bash anyone who's, like, going and trying music. It's, do it, absolutely do it, but just come to it humble, you know, like, don't come in swinging and do the best you can, but just be humble about it and be like, you know, because I think that'll help you relate to the other people on your maybe game jam team, you know. So
right on. And I love one of the things that was emphasized is, like, being okay with having different experiences outside of college, like different career opportunities and ways that you make money.
Yeah.
Because like when you, just by living life in general, you come across so many life-changing moments that you would have never had you gone a different way. Like, for example, you mentioned working on a cruise ship. Like, what are the life experiences that you had doing that you wouldn't have gotten somewhere else? You know what I mean?
That would be a good plug for go listen to episode 1 of Spice to Meet You with Eric Lundgren. No, because he's also a cruise ship musician, and we just talk about that a little bit. But and actually episode 2, because my friend Brian, he's also we talk about that a little bit. What I learned from that is, like, you have such a privileged, I guess, day to day, because and I think it's, it's a great thing, because right now there's very few jobs in music that you can go and just apply for it like a regular job. Like, I'm going to go apply to be a data analyst at this company. It's as similar as that as you can get in the music industry, because most of it is like, well, just make a whole bunch of stuff and hopefully someone likes it, right? That's kind of the model of our industry. Whereas working on a cruise ship, I went and there's, again, even that, there's not enough opportunity. There's not as much opportunity as there was when I started, which was like 2010. It's going and so that experience was like, we play 2 shows a night, or this set or whatever. You work at night, but then you have lots of free time, right? And what I learned from that was time management. Like I said, like I did it for 6 years. I spent the first 1.5, 2 kind of going, let's go to the beach, man. Like, I was 22. I'm like, this is awesome. I made it. I did it. After like a period of like getting there and going, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And then practicing my ass off, memorizing everything to make sure I could stay here. And then after that, it was just kind of like you level off and go, all right, well, I'm comfortable with all this stuff. Like, I'm doing my job. So here we are. And then you kind of get into a groove of, I'm in Key West tomorrow. I'm in this tomorrow. I'm going to go enjoy this. And absolutely, it's great to do that. But then after a while, after year 3, year 4, year 5, like, I have a girlfriend now who becomes my fiance. I start to go, what am I going to do next? Right. And it became an environment of like, it's like a dorm. It's like a floating dorm, right? It became that. It went from that to being like, I wish I had my own space, like I do right now, to hang my Majora's Mask on and have a conversation with you guys, have like my equipment, my practice room, all my stuff. I start to want those things, and I go, how am I going to get there? And I apply for this master's degree, that, or figure out like, oh, I have a bunch of friends in Las Vegas from cruise ships, that sort of, because there's a kind of like an exchange kind of thing that happens. There's a lot of entertainers that go back and forth between Vegas and ships. So from that whole experience is just, I learned, how am I going to get there? I'm doing it right. How I said, like, I planned the next 5-6 months of my life. I did that on cruise ships. I went through History of Western Music, and I went through every chapter.
Oh, I remember that. I had that book.
Listen to it. Yeah, it's propping up my monitor right now. Because it's, excellent resource, but I knew that I had to get these like entrance exams. So I'm like, how am I going to do that? I figured out, here's how much time I have. And I ended up like every day going and at this particular spot at the back of the main lounge where I knew there was no guests for X amount of hours. Like, I figured out like when they open the doors, when it's like not accessible to guests, and I like set up my little space, and I had that space to myself, right? So I figured out within the limits of working on a cruise ship, like how to go and use my time efficiently. And that's just something. And here's the thing: is like, that's done for you when you're in school. It's like you have a schedule that they give you after you sign up for your courses, so that's already done. But like, you can. That's the reason that formal education is sort of a little bit more efficient that way because you have deadlines. You got to do it now, and here's how much time you have. You can do that on your own. It just takes, and it can be more relaxed. It can be more intense. It's up to you. But that's one thing. It just sort of you sort of take the reins on your own thing, and you can do anything. So that's what I learned, I think.
Dude, that is so cool. And like being able to be on that cruise ship and then travel the world, get paid to do, and then after you experience that, then making the transition to the next stage of your career, and understanding for the students out there that you don't always have just one thing that you do out of high school or out of college, and then you do that for the rest of your life. Your career, your wants, your needs, they're all going to evolve.
Exactly.
And that's just part of being a human being, right?
Yeah, man. Because
so
when I was 20, sorry, keep your train of thought, but when I was 20, I just, like, that was, if I can, because I knew about the cruise ship gig, I'm like, if I could just do that, that's all I would need. And then 6 years later, after doing that, I'm like, I need to get out of here. It was the opposite. It was like, I felt like I didn't need, and I was, of course, very grateful for the opportunity. And it's like, yeah, you're seeing these places, you're meeting people from every corner of the planet, which is probably the best part of that. And you're making pretty decent money doing it, playing saxophone, right? Like, how many jobs can say you get this paycheck after playing saxophone all week? Not many, right? And they're dwindling even. But what were you going to say? Sorry.
Actually, I was just going to transition into talking into careers, and that one in particular, that sounds so interesting. Like, if somebody wanted to play music on a cruise ship, like, what would be the process to do that?
It has changed so much in just the past 10 years or so. It's changed quite a bit. I applied directly to the company that I worked for, Carnival. Like that, they literally went to their website and they said, here's you can book a time and like blah blah blah, upload your resume stuff, and then you get kind of like any other job, you would get past this stage and then go to this stage, blah blah blah. But I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I think that most of them are doing exclusively, they're working with like agencies. There's like Landau Music is one, Lime Entertainment is another one, who's actually the founder is a buddy of mine, Sam Rothberg. They're agencies that it's not just that they're the go-between. They're like, they'll give you the material, you'll play it for them. They'll give you feedback. If you're not good enough, they'll go, here's what we just work on this stuff. Go and figure out, like, if you can't play on 12-bar blues, you need to learn how to play on 12-bar blues. We're not going to teach you that, but, that's what you need to do. And they can sort of work with you to get you to where you want to be, kind of thing. As far as I know. Don't quote me on their exact services they provide, but yeah, look up like cruise ship agencies, Google some stuff. I'm not the authority on that anymore, because it changes. The gig itself, and I could talk for ages on that. I won't, but briefly, it just went from being like, when I arrived, it was a 10-piece orchestra that I would play with, where it was like a 6-horn section and then a rhythm section, and then we would do sets and blah blah blah. So you'd have like a fairly big thing. There's much fewer horn trombone, trumpet, saxophone positions available. But I know that last time I checked, Carnival was doing like sort of like they had three-piece horn band where they would play with like tracks. It would just be the horn players playing in this lobby, and then the rhythm section would be playing somewhere else on the ship, and then sometimes they would come and play together. That's kind of where the last time I checked, that was the sort of vibe, at least with Carnival. And there's there's some variety with different companies. That a lot of them will just sort of do what the other ones are doing to compete. But yeah, so that's kind of the vibe. That's how you would kind of look into that, I think.
Okay, cool. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with all of our listeners.
Of course.
Is there anything now that you've shared and given to the people in the audience? Is there anything that you're looking for in particular for you? Like all the listeners out there, if they were to reach out into their skill sets, into their networks, what are things that you're looking for help with that hopefully somebody might be able to help out with?
Nice. Yeah. I mean, it's not just like, what are you plugging kind of thing. It's more like, what are you... It's a good question. I don't know. Like to help me with particularly, or like...
Yeah, like are there opportunities that you're looking for? Are there, people with certain skill sets that you're looking to add on to a project? Like, because with all the people out there,
yeah,
you never know who's connected to who, right? And how can somebody say, hey, maybe my cousin is a programmer that's looking to work on a game jam, and coincidentally, you've got one. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, what I would say is like, if there's any, I'm constantly, not recently because of all this like scheduling stuff that I've had to do for myself, but if there's like animators out there, if there's people making short films, not just to say like, hey, I can provide service. It's more like, because I reach out to people on Instagram a lot, where like I follow a lot of like CG artists and animators and stuff, because I always want to sort of like practice sound design, because I am like a musician, a composer, but I'm still fairly new to the sound design thing. A couple years experience, but I'm always wanted to get more practice. If there's anyone that has like any need for like just and it's not like a paid thing, but like if they need sound or want to see their animation with sound or music, hit me up. Because like I do that anyway. I reach out to people anyway, saying like, I love this little, and it, a lot of times it'll just be like a little couple seconds of an animation that they did that I'll add some Foley or add some sound effects to, but it helps me get used to doing that. And I think and a lot of people, and it's been really well received. So basically, go to my Instagram and just look at what I've done before for people. And that's the stuff that I love to sort of practice. So that's one thing that I would say. So
cool.
Yeah,
and man, that's holy shit. It's already been over an hour that we've been chatting together. It's crazy how fast these conversations go by. Right?
Yeah. And I found that with my podcast. I had to have a 2-parter. Episode 2 was a 2-parter because I couldn't. Red Circle wouldn't let me upload the file. Was too big, so I had to. I get it. Struggle is real. Trying to keep it under a certain amount of time.
But that's the beautiful part of having a podcast is you can have multiple episodes. You can have guests on multiple times. And definitely love hearing about your journey and all of the things that you're doing and looking to do. Thanks, I'm just like, for me, and I'm sure Byron feels the same way, just like being honored that you'd spend, some time out of your week to hang out with us and have this conversation.
I feel the same, man.
Dude, thank you so much, Mr. Byron. I know this is we're past the hour. My apologies for not being
no.
Closer.
Hey, that's all me. That's all me. That's tangent guy over here. That's
it's all good.
Sorry for the editing you'll have to do.
Yeah, you didn't see it, but in the background I said we're past an hour, but this is pretty interesting. Let's keep it going. But yeah, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Second time.
Thank you.
Don't worry, this time the episode will be saved. We will make sure we have the recordings and everything. I got the. Yeah,
we have 2 Zoom recordings. I guess we're not on Zoom. We're on Discord. Never mind.
Yeah,
was gonna say I have my portable thing as a backup recording, so I'm gonna send you that. Just so you know how to do that.
Cool. And what's up?
Oh, I was just gonna say thank you for having me on, and I'm in my own podcast. I'm trying to talk about myself less, so maybe this will be like a catharsis for me. Just like get it out into the world, so I don't talk about myself so much on my own podcast.
Yeah, it's a tough balance for sure, but it was interesting. I loved having you on here. And
Thanks,
as for wrapping up, can you go ahead and remind everyone the name of your podcast, and as well as like your website and your where can people find you? Basically, your reel.
So I'm my website is michaelspicermusic.com. You can find basically everything to do with me there. I put it all there. My podcast, there's also a podcast tab on the website, but the podcast, if you want to search it on Spotify, iTunes, whatever, is Spice to Meet You. And then I also have like just all my sound design stuff on my website, but I have like things like if you wanted, I have free transcriptions that I've done, saxophone transcriptions. Just I have the PDF, the actual files. You can just download them right from the website. So I have a whole spiel of like you should go and transcribe stuff yourself, but they're there if you're interested in that. I do music prep. I write charts. So if you're a singer, especially in the Las Vegas area, I've in the middle of helping one of my friends from one of the shows I used to play. Put together a Motown show or a Ray Charles tribute show on a cruise ship right now. So I did all the charts for him, and I do that kind of stuff too. So yeah, michaelspicermusic.com, Spice to Meet You. Social media, I'm at Instagram. I'm at Michael Spicer Composer, and then I think Twitter, I'm Spicer Audio. I can't remember. I think that's
awesome.
It. Yeah,
cool. Thank you so much. All right,
Thank
guys.
you.
That concludes this episode of the EmpowerUp podcast, and just wanted to remind you guys we are on basically all the social platforms. We'll post this episode on YouTube a few weeks from now. So if you haven't caught this live on Twitch, you can also tune in on there. And again, you can kind of get updates on where we're at. We post on TikTok. We actually will post a few days before to promote the guests for the weekend. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
Bye.
Peace out.